NES Chest.
NES Chest here, and today's video we're going to be talking about Capcom games for the Nintendo GameCube.
Round one, fight! Hadouken!
Let me start by emphasizing how important it is for any game system, especially Nintendo's, to have good second-party and third-party support. Without it, you're just gonna crash. Although there are some amazing GameCube exclusive titles, they're really mostly from Nintendo themselves or second-party affiliates. There really wasn't much outside help from a third party, which is just one of the reasons Nintendo struggled against Xbox and PS2 in the 6th generation. In the NES heyday, Konami and Capcom were one of the reasons Nintendo was so successful. You got awesome titles like Megaman 1-6, you got the really fun Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, like who doesn't want to play that on a nice Saturday morning with friends? You got DuckTales, which had some of the best music offered on the system, tough as nails games like Ghosts and Goblins, and the classic and immortal Bionic Commando. Capcom, you did pretty good. Some of their lesser known titles, which are actually quite outstanding, include games like Little Nemo Dream Master, a spin-off of Ghosts and Goblins, which is Gargoyle's Quest 2, and a shooting game known as Legendary Wings. My personal favorite's Willow. This game is actually a lot better than people think. Gotta love Willow from the 80s.
Blackroot? I am the father of 2 children, and you never ever give a baby Blackroot.
That's a life lesson right there. As a PR stunt, in 2002, Nintendo and Capcom announced there would be 5 exclusives for the Cube, known as the Capcom 5. In these 5 games we had Dead Phoenix, Piano 3, Resident Evil 4, Viewtiful Joe,
Head to the go-go, baby!
and Killer7. Piano 3 remained the only exclusive, and Dead Phoenix was cancelled. The concept of the game was that it's basically a 3D Legendary Wings, a little bit like Panzer Dragoon, but also not on rails. It was more of a open-ended game where you could go anywhere you wanted. I really like the idea that the player was supposed to feel actual wind currents. Unfortunately, that didn't fan out. So let's get to it. All the games I'm going to show here are in the order of their actual release on the system.
An exclusive to the GameCube at the time, Resident Evil 0.
It's a nice coincidence that the first game released by Capcom on the GameCube also has the lowest number, and that's Resident Evil 0. The game sold a little bit over 500,000 copies, which is pretty good for GC standards. Finding a copy for a decent price shouldn't be too difficult, as I regularly see it around $10. Resident Evil 0 received generally positive reviews, in the 80% and plus. Originally intended to be an N64 title, but due to capacity it couldn't be put on the system, Resident Evil 0 takes place before the original Resident Evil game. I would definitely recommend this game, but I would first suggest you try the original Resident Evil, because this one's a little bit more difficult, due to the fact that you have Rebecca and Billy, and you have to deal with both of them at the same time. Solving puzzles is not the easiest thing in the world.
Resident Evil, the remake.
Selling over 630,000 copies and getting rave reviews, the Resident Evil remake looks beautiful on the GameCube. It's got the same spooky mansion, great creatures, and really old tank controls that scare the hell out of you. You can play it on current gen consoles, but there's really nothing like playing it on the GameCube. I recommend going in the basement, turning off the lights, and just enjoying the game. This game happened to be released on my birthday, and it's not that expensive to find. You can definitely catch it for $10 to $20. So a definite recommendation for a pickup. Resident Evil, the remake. Also known as Millionaire Fighting in Japan, Capcom vs SNK 2 Easy Operation was an only for GameCube game. However, it's also available on the Xbox. There are a few different versions of the title across multiple platforms and in the arcade. It basically takes all the memorable characters from Street Fighter, King of Fighters, and Samurai Showdown and puts them all in one easily accessible format for you. Similar to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which in my opinion is the greatest 2D fighting game of all time, you could have up to 3 characters on your team, and a match wins when you defeat all your opponents. The title EO, or Easy Operation, is there because you can pull off special moves like the Dragon Uppercut or the Hadouken with the ease of moving the C-stick in a specific direction. There are actually a multitude of different control schemes to choose and play from. I was a little overwhelmed when I saw them all. Not to mention that there's a ridiculous number of characters. Go Zangief! Kidding. The game didn't sell that well, only 90,000 copies. It did receive somewhat positive reviews, and to my knowledge is one of the only standalone true 2D sprite fighting games on the system. As an uncommon title, it'll cost you upwards of $20 to $30 for a complete in-box copy.
Resident Evil 3.
The original script for the game had Jill Valentine on a cruise liner. They tried to use the confined spaces to create that claustrophobic atmosphere we're so used to. But due to the release of the PS2 and limited time, Capcom merged Resident Evil 3 with another project. For this reason, there's a lot more action and the enemies are more abundant than usual titles. This game takes place 24 hours before Resident Evil 2 in Raccoon City. For reasons unknown, this game was released the day before Resident Evil 2. Often when I see a copy of Resident Evil 2, I see a copy of Resident Evil 3 right beside it on the store shelf. It seems like the same people bought 2 and 3 at the same time. Selling only 60,000 copies, this is probably the most rare version of Resident Evil 3 you can find. And due to this, it's probably going to go up in price. Right now it'll cost you about $30 to $40.
And we've got Resident Evil 2.
Originally released in 1998 on the PS1, the GameCube version of Resident Evil 2 is only slightly updated in graphical terms. Resident Evil 2, although receiving a lower Metacritic score than normal, is acclaimed by many. It did only sell 40,000 copies, and it is the lowest print run of the Resident Evil games on the GameCube, so it's kind of weird that it doesn't fetch the highest price. Right now it'll cost you between $35 and $40 to find complete. A full-fledged remake of this title, like Resident Evil 1, was considered, but because of the pressure to work on Resident Evil 4, Capcom scrapped that idea. And you know what? I'm glad they did, because if they didn't, Resident Evil 4 might not have become the masterpiece that it is today.
You've got a game that was supposed to be a kind of an homage to old arcade shooters, except it's 3D, and this is product number 3, or Piano 3.
Released in 2003, and on the uncommon side of the spectrum, Piano 3 sales didn't meet expectations. There was only 60,000 copies. I remember seeing it at a local microplay store and assumed it was a stylistic adventure title. It's actually a third-person shooter. Now, product number 3 was one of the only Capcom 5 games to remain a GC exclusive. The game's director, Shinji Mikami, was disappointed in the final result because the game was a bit of a rush. As a consequence, they didn't have much time to polish it up. And you notice that the controls are a bit clunky, the game's a bit on the short side, but it is pretty challenging. They didn't really focus on the backgrounds because they wanted to make it feel like an NES title, so I'm guessing they wanted to make it fun and really tough. But it didn't receive the best ratings, but it is kind of collectible and there is a little bit of a cult following. It will only cost you $10 to $20, but I would expect that price to go up as more and more people start collecting for the Cube. A 2003 release, Megaman Network Transmission was the first Mega Man title to grace the purple lunchbox. You'll find that Network Transmission's gameplay will be a slight diversion for those expecting the patented game design features of the Mega Man games of old. The game takes place in a virtual world as you plug into the internet and you're in essence playing inside a computer. You do fight in the Mega Man traditional style, but the gameplay focuses more on navigating your way around your environment. You'll have a variety of weapons to use in your inventory, but you have limited quantities, so you're going to have to be more strategic. It's not like Metal Blade in Mega Man 2, which you can use all the time. This game is the least sought after Mega Man title, even though it is the only GameCube exclusive. If you want it, it'll set you back about $15 to $20 complete in box. Mega Man Network Transmission's claim to fame is that it's also quite a difficult little title.
Mickey Mouse Magical Mirror.
You know, it is possible to make something that both kids and adults can enjoy, just on different levels. This game, though, isn't one such example. Selling 40,000 copies, Magical Mirror is not at the same level of future Mickey titles on the Nintendo Wii. But during the GC era, both Konami and Capcom had licenses for the Mickey Mouse titles. Konami was scheduled to make 5 sports games, although they ended up making only 4: football, soccer, skateboarding, and the worst of all, basketball. The games themselves are visually nice, but the gameplay is somewhat incoherent. For real collectors out there, getting all these titles can be a bit of a challenge. Well, this one's pretty unique. This is Automata Lesta. It was also available on the PlayStation 2, but it didn't really sell that well, and only 20,000 copies are available. It's a cel-shaded racer with a little bit of realistic style gameplay. So there's different brands, there's Hondas, lots of different sports cars. It's fun. I played a little bit. I didn't find it too exciting, but for the car collector out there, it's pretty interesting. And there are a lot of rare car racing games on the GameCube. So definitely add this one to your collection. If you ever see it, this is one to pick up because you will not see it that often. Selling just over 400,000 copies, Viewtiful Joe was a breath of fresh air at the time. There really aren't that many action side-scrollers on the system, and this one is definitely unique. It got rave reviews from both critics and players. With the speed up and slow down mechanic, kind of this Matrix-style fighting, and it's kind of got a style all its own. It just makes fun of itself, and it's fun to play. I especially like the bosses. I think those guys are pretty amusing. The dinosaur that talks, the fact that you're in a movie, when you jump, it looks like you're looking up at the top of the screen like you're in the front row. Those little touches just make it really special and a great game. So since there are 3 Viewtiful Joes on the GameCube, it's definitely kind of a collectible game, and one of those games that's in people's top 25 lists for sure. Introducing Mickey's Hide and Sneak.
Hold on tight, Minnie! I'll see ya!
Yes, Minnie gets captured by an alien mushroom, and it's your job to go after and find her. This game, Mickey Hide and Sneak, is exactly what the title entails. You hide from these aliens and you sneak around, trying to get keys and go to different rooms. It only sold 30,000 copies, so that's pretty low. It didn't get the best reviews, but it will cost you $10 to $15 to find complete.
And probably the most valuable Capcom game on the GameCube, Gotcha Force.
There's a song from Megaman 8 that sounds so much like the music from Gotcha Force. Let's check it out.
I come here, but I don't know what to do!
Maybe it's just me. Oh yeah, Gotcha Force. One of the most collectible and really enjoyable little gems on the system. In my opinion, Gotcha Force is basically the little Samson for the GameCube. It sold only 10,000 copies in North America, but since then it's taken on cult status fairly quickly, and the price reflects this. To find a copy, you'll have to spend well over $100 and possibly into the $200. And that price won't be going down. Receiving very little publicity, it was released on the same day as Code Veronica X. Why you'd compete against yourself, I'm not really sure. Now, the most devastating piece of news for this game's sales was that 3 days earlier, Grand Theft Auto 3 came out. So basically everyone was playing GTA 3 in their basement. Gotcha Force is a very unique title, but it's one of those games that you really have to invest a few hours into before the real magic happens. It's a third-person fighting game, and I can understand why it got mediocre reviews initially. For those playing the game, the overworld is not that enticing, and the control mechanics don't seem to do anything new. But where the fun and the creativity come in is when you start collecting new Borgs. These Borgs can be like ninjas, giant robots, flying hawks. You can do all sorts of crazy things, and you can really customize your team. When I first started playing it, I wasn't really sure, but then after a little bit, you go, yeah, this game is really fun, and it's very addictive. For the collectors out there, this will be pretty much the toughest one to find.
Resident Evil Code Veronica X.
Can you believe it? There are 6 Resident Evils on the GameCube. That's crazy. Oh, Capcom. Anyway, Code Veronica X is probably the most valuable standalone title on the system, even though Resident Evil 2 sold less copies. Originally released on the Dreamcast, this was the first Resident Evil not to be placed on a Sony platform. It's a slight diversion from its predecessors, as in Code Veronica X you have complete control of the camera angles, and there are no pre-rendered backgrounds, it's full 3D. In the game, you help Chris and Claire Redfield survive a viral outbreak. The creators of this game actually consider it the real sequel to Resident Evil 2.
And I have something special here. This is actually the Player's Choice Resident Evil 10th Anniversary Collection. So you get this only at GameStop. It contains Resident Evil 0, and Resident Evil 4 in the same pack, and it has this nifty cardboard cover to it, so which is kind of cool. But yeah, neat. And it's actually interesting, at this point, they don't have the only 4 symbol on the Resident Evil 4.
I do love my Mega Man. Now I played through all 6 Mega Mans on the NES a few times, and each time I do I find something new from the experience. Now for those looking for a cheap way to get Mega Man 1 to 8, this is an option for you. However, I would not recommend the GameCube version, solely on the basis that the company that ported the title swapped the jump and the fire buttons. Basically this renders some of the titles virtually unplayable for me. Basically you have to reteach yourself all the muscle memory you've acquired over the years of playing platformers. Oh my gosh, what did they do? But some of the game it is possible to play, like Mega Man 8 I think it was okay for me with the controls. Anyway, there is really nothing like playing Mega Man on the original NES with the original NES controller, so I'd recommend that route if possible. Now the game did sell pretty well, 320,000 copies, and it'll cost you between 20 and 30 bucks. So I'm not suggesting you don't get this, but I do caution about the inverted buttons, and some of the music emulation is a little off. But otherwise it's a pretty good experience. Next up, we've got Megaman X Command Mission. Surprisingly, this is an RPG. It does take place in the Mega Man X universe, and you learn a lot about the Reploids and actually what happens in that space. So for those people who are really big fans of Mega Man X, this is pretty cool. It is a standard RPG like Lord of the Rings Third Age and Evolution Worlds and this other game like Cubics. Those are the kind of basic RPGs you have on the GameCube, and Mega Man X is kind of another addition to that. So it doesn't go too much into character development or add any different styles of gameplay, but if you like sitting down Super NES style RPGs, this is a game that I think you'll enjoy.
Don't move! Head to the go-go, baby!
Selling about 200,000 copies less than its predecessor, Viewtiful Joe 2 is a game that really is pretty similar to Viewtiful Joe 1. They didn't add too much, although you can play as Sylvia. I really love Viewtiful Joe 1, and they didn't change much. And sometimes you need to take a chance and change the gameplay a little bit in a sequel. I don't think they really changed it for Viewtiful Joe 2. It was more of the same. And that is kind of interesting because Clover Studios are really creative people, so it's kind of ironic that they didn't take a chance and change it, whereas they kept kind of the same even though they are super creative.
Viewtiful Joe Red Hot Rumble.
Viewtiful Joe Red Hot Rumble was the last installment of Viewtiful Joe we've seen so far. It's basically a Smash Brothers clone, and it obviously doesn't live up to Smash Brothers because few games do, but it is a fun party game to get together with a bunch of friends. I did find it a little bit chaotic, although I do believe they spent a lot of time working on the controls, and it does feel right. The moves are good, each player is kind of unique, and but it's just chaotic action. It is better than Digimon Rumble Arena 2, which is definitely a lot simpler and more basic a game. Since this one didn't sell very well, I'd consider looking for it, because people really like to collect their series. Killer7, one of the famous Capcom 5. This is a game that I always had a really hard time understanding. I'd pick it up and I'd get lost pretty quickly, then turn it off. It's a game that's not for everybody. It sold a little bit better than product number 3, and it was also available for PS2 owners. It's a very bizarre and dark game. It is an on-rails third-person shooter, but managed to be a genre that's kind of all its own. It's freaky, thought-provoking, involves some puzzle solving and some shooting. There really is no other game like Killer7. Designed by Goichi Suda of No More Heroes fame, and if you like that game, then I recommend trying Killer7. If you want something dark and a little bit different, and definitely collectible, this is a game up your alley.
The best Resident Evil in my opinion, Resident Evil 4.
In about 2005, the GameCube wasn't doing very well, and Resident Evil 4 was that injection in the bloodstream that got the system going again. The game sold about 1 million copies, which is pretty awesome, and there's not that many million sellers on the Cube. So it did bring a lot of life back into it, which is also funny because you'll be taking a lot of lives in this game. They changed the mechanics compared to the old Resident Evils. No more tank controls, but really slow enemies coming at you that kind of brought that fear in. I love the changes they made to this game. I think Resident Evil 4 is an amazing title. I played it so much. Back in university, I lived in this house with 5 girls, and they really wanted to watch TV. Unfortunately, I was playing Resident Evil 4, and I actually finished the game. I was doing like these extra missions, but I love the game so much, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm playing Resident Evil. So normally I'm a nice guy and I would actually let people watch TV, but for this game, yeah, sorry, too bad. We did it. This is the last game released on the GameCube. Now, it's fitting that we started with Resident Evil 0 and are now ending with Megaman X. Contrary to popular belief, Megaman X does not stand for the Roman numeral 10. It's actually the algebraic letter X, and this represents Mega Man's unlimited power, because as we know, X can be anything in algebra. Anyway, I thought that was kind of a cool idea. Now, this is a great title, and it's very sought after by both players and collectors. The reason? It contains X1, X2, X3, X4, X5, and X6, and it also has a little racing game if you beat 3 of the Mega Man games. Now, only 100,000 copies were sold because this was kind of released late in the GameCube's lifespan. The game does sell for over $50 regularly. Now, I think this game's fantastic. I love the wall climbing, the backtracking, the difficulty of all the bosses. The only thing that is an issue with this collection is that the sound emulation is a little bit off, particularly in X3, which was the Sega Saturn version. I would recommend using the D-pad. Even though it is a little small in the GameCube controller, it's still a lot better than using the analog stick. Anyway, this game's amazing, and I hope you find one. Well, that's it. These are the 20 games that were released by Capcom on Nintendo GameCube. We've got 6 Resident Evil games, 2 Mickey Mouse games, 3 Viewtiful Joes, 4 Mega Man titles, and 5 kind of hidden gems. Anyway, I hope you learned a lot from this video and you enjoyed it. Until next time, take care.